Look, if I were standing here with a collected copy of the works of Shakespeare in one hand and the Springfield News Leader in the other, and I asked you which one is true, what would you say? Shakespeare or a newspaper? Shakespeare never claimed to be writing history or giving a news report, though some of his plays are loosely based on certain historical characters. There was a Julius Caesar, for example. There was, if not Hamlet, a Prince of Denmark and a murder and palace intrigue. Other works of Shakespeare's, A Midsummer Night's Dream, are entirely imaginary fiction. But how much of a stretch would it be to say that our local newspaper accounts are loosely based on historical characters and events, and that some of their columns are completely imaginary fiction? Speaking critically, we would not say that either a newspaper or Shakespeare is true, though both contain certain truths. The newspaper may give you some factual accounts about the city's mayoral election, but Shakespeare would give you some genuine insights into the political intrigue and the abuses of power and money among kings and mayors and lovers. You might even say that there are almost no facts in Shakespeare, but there's an awful lot of truth. And most of us would likely say that there is a real paucity of truth in the media, though we still depend upon them for facts. And that, my friends, is not a subtle difference. Those are two really, really different things, facts and truth. Traditional religious people often read their sacred scriptures looking for facts. But they're looking for facts in a book that doesn't have any facts in it. I mean, all of the sacred scriptures of the world, of Buddhists, Muslims, Jews, Christians, were all written by people who didn't know where the sun goes at night. I mean, there's not a lot of facts in any of these scriptures. But if you read it looking for truth about life, meaning, purpose, you would be very pleasantly surprised. There's a lot there. A lot of really great insights there. Now, we're just a couple of weeks away from Easter in the traditional calendar, the Revised Common Lectionary, which I have a pretty sketchy relationship with, but I look at it some weeks more than others. And our reading from Ezekiel today comes from the Revised Common Lectionary. It's sort of a warm-up to Easter. It's a resurrection image out of Ezekiel in this valley of dry bones. And at least in the vision, dead people are brought back to life. Next week, the lectionary would have us read exhaustively from the Gospel's account of the triumphal entry, Palm Sunday text out of one of the Gospels. And of course, the following Sunday, texts about Jesus' resurrection on Easter morning. Now, even in conservative churches all across the country today that follow the lectionary, they're going to read this Ezekiel passage as being symbolic. There's nobody that I trust in any pulpit that's going to say that God actually brought back to life the slain armies of Judah. They recognize that this is a dream, a vision, not something that happened. They will, however, in most cases, read that Palm Sunday narrative as if that's exactly how it happened, and they'll read the Easter text as if they were eyewitness accounts being described on the 10 o'clock news. But I think even the Palm Sunday and Easter accounts are a lot more like Shakespeare's account of Julius Caesar than they are a journalist's account of the life of Jesus. I think that Jesus was a real historical character, but you can't prove it. But that historical character then gets used for narratives that are written long after he's gone with very little attention to the details of his life, much as the way Shakespeare writes about Julius Caesar. I know that none of that is going to come as a surprise to any of you, but I'm belaboring the point a bit today in order to rescue this text from Ezekiel, both to mine it for the truths it conveys, and in a way to set it up on its feet so that I can have a little theological boxing match with it at the same time. And Ezekiel's been dead for a long time, so I'm feeling good about my chances of winning that little exchange. I won't bore you with a lot of the history behind Ezekiel's vision, but let's just say that his country had been through a horrible, crushing war, and they had suffered a terrible defeat on the battlefield. Within a few years of this national defeat, the survivors could hardly remember what their country had been like before it was ruined. And I don't want to go all apocalyptic on you here, but the truth is that people will learn to accept almost anything. Just give them a little time. People live in poor ghettos for a few decades, and they start to think of themselves as being the kind of people that live in poor ghettos. Harriet Tubman was alleged to have said, "I freed 1,000 slaves, and I could have freed 1,000 more if only they had known they were slaves." Now, I love that quote. She didn't say it. Somebody wrote that in the 1990s, but it's a perfect example of this text. Harriet Tubman didn't say it, and the historical Harriet Tubman freed about 70 slaves as the highest possible count. She made 13 trips that she wrote about following the Underground Railroad, and freeing 70 slaves was no small event, but certainly not 1,000. But still, this quote that was made up for her conveys an awful lot of truth. There's an awful lot of people who could be liberated if they just knew that they were slaves, if they just understood that they do not have to accept where they are living and how they are living. Part of the historically unique and amazing and almost unbelievable accomplishment of Martin Luther King Jr. died when he was 39. What had you done by the time you were 39? I mean, I just can't believe what this guy did in his 30s. But he kept saying to the peers in the black community of his time, the white man can't ride on your back if you'll stand up straight. If you'll just stop bending over for them, they can't keep riding you. My new hero, Chase Iron Eyes of the Sioux tribe in North Dakota, is desperately trying to convince his Native American peers that they don't have to always live in a locked box called poverty. And Dan could tell you, the people we encountered up there at Standing Rock, most of the tribal people that we met really had a mindset of poverty and of hopelessness and just give me something. I mean, they were almost reduced to being beggars. These proud, noble people have spent 180 years living on a reservation that has just beaten out of them a sense of who they really are. And Iron Eyes is one of those people that got arrested early in life. He'd stolen a car, spent time in jail, but he made a jailhouse decision to get his life together and went to law school, married a pediatrician that lived on the reservation, and he is desperately trying to persuade his peer group, we don't have to live like this. We don't have to just be dependent on the crumbs that fall from the casino at Standing Rock. But it's slow going because most of the people around him are really just looking for someone to buy him dinner and get him a drink. Ezekiel says in his vision that the Lord took him out to this place where his nation had suffered its greatest humiliation, the graveyard where the bones of the armies of Judah lay scattered about. And the Lord asks him in this vision, Son of man. Circumlocution for just boy, person, man. Boy, what do you think? Can these bones live? Martin Luther King looks at the ghetto in Birmingham and you wonder, can this ever be fixed? Chase Iron Eyes walks across the millions of acres of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe and you say, do you see any signs of life here? Is there any way that you can put something back together that is this broken? Because it doesn't look promising. Things that are that dead tend to stay dead. You think about all the things that historically made waves of immigrants come to these shores for the past 300 years, really. When the British started coming, and the Irish, the Germans, the Italians, the Poles, the Russians, the Romanians, what made people risk their lives right up to the present moment in tiny little boats coming from Haiti and Cuba and the Dominican Republic? Why have people walked from El Salvador and Guatemala and Nicaragua, riding on the tops of trains to make it through Mexico to try to sneak into the United States? What are they coming for? What did they think was here that wasn't there? You don't leave Puerto Rico and move to New York for the weather. What are they coming for? A chance, just a chance, an opportunity to work their way out of poverty, a chance for their kids to get an education, to be able to take their kid to the doctor when they're sick, a chance maybe to get to live long enough to actually retire. Those of you that have traveled in Central America, you don't see a lot of real old people there, do you? They don't even have a vision of what it's like for people to be retired because they don't live that long. So when you take away from this land that people have risked their lives to come to, you take away health care, you gut salaries, you privatize Social Security, you close Planned Parenthood, you make education a luxury available to the rich and totally out of reach of the poor. Tell me, can these bones live? Does our country have any reason to hope? Now, forgive me for this part of the vision. The Lord asks the prophet, can they live? And this is where I don't like this text. So the prophet says, I don't know. You know. And then the way it theologically works is sort of a, I got this. Watch it. Sort of like God saying to Ezekiel, here, hold my beer. And God does it. God makes it happen. Harriet Tubman did not tell slaves, just have faith and God will set you free. She said, run! Martin Luther King didn't go into the ghettos and say, be persons of good conscience, goodwill, pray with me. He said, march with me, resist. You won't hear me quote the 19th century evangelist Alexander Campbell very often, but he hit the nail right on the head when he said, anyone who will get down on their knees and pray for something that they will not then stand up and work and sacrifice to accomplish is only insulting God and disappointing themselves. Now, I've never been satisfied with America the way as I've found it. I grew up with the Vietnam War on Walter Cronkite every night. I've always known something was dramatically wrong with my country. When Carter was in office, when Clinton was in office, even when Obama was in office, I've never been satisfied. But folks, right now, I thought we were better than this. I didn't think this is who we were. I thought we were stronger than this. Progress wasn't going fast enough to suit me, but I grew up in a household with a father who looked at the microwave and said, hurry up! I've never been satisfied with the pace of change in our country. But now we have moved so far backwards so fast. And it could get worse. I mean, our nation could be at war soon. I don't even know which country might draw the short straw. It could be Syria, it could be Iran, it could be North Korea. But as President Trump's approval ratings get lower and lower and lower, the one guaranteed way for a president to get up above 50% approval is to go to war. It works every time. And trust me, this is the kind of guy that would do it to change his approval ratings. But with or without a new war, much of what brought those immigrants to our shores for the past 200 or 300 years is being dismantled and thrown into the sea right in front of us. And it is as if we have lost our ability to be ashamed of ourselves. I'm not hearing much out of religious leaders. Some, but not enough. What are we praying? Are we praying? Are we waiting for God to knit those bones back together? Is it God that's going to do it? In Senate hearings earlier this month, when the totally unqualified Betsy DeVos was nominated to be Secretary of Education. Now, this is a woman who inherited money from Amway. I mean, if you want to come by your money in a scurrilous way. Anyway, she and her family have contributed more than $200 million to Republican candidates. And virtually everyone who voted for her to become the Secretary of Education, everyone that voted for her, had received more than $50,000 from her in political donations. Now, how do you get to vote on someone who's paying your salary, who's keeping you in a job? Al Franken, former comedian, I mean, I couldn't believe this guy was running for the Senate and that he got there, but he's there. He looks at her in the hearings and says, Ms. DeVos, would you even be here if you were not the largest contributor of political funds to the Republican Party? And she doesn't even answer the question. But there is an obvious answer, isn't there? It's an obvious answer that there is no way around the fact that a woman who has absolutely no experience or knowledge about public education could be put in charge of public education, other than the fact that she bought the seat. Don't let that be spun any other way. She bought the seat. I've finally gotten most people in my life trained to not text me during normal sleeping hours. Not your sleeping hours, my sleeping hours. The fact that you are awake does not mean that I am. But I've got a friend who will text me at 12 o'clock at night and 5 o'clock in the morning, and he's a pastor, so you don't expect a lot of rational thought there. But he will text me whenever something strikes him about something having gone bad wrong. And since November 8th, I've gotten a lot of texts. But Brian said to me one day this week that a member of his church had told him, God chose Donald Trump to be president, and we have to sit back and let God's plan work itself out. And I said, does your church member think that God is a Russian? The tyrants, the corporate demagogues, the super rich want you to believe that God is in charge of history and that you should pray for dim bones, dim old dry bones to live again, because they don't want you to look behind the curtain to see who is really in charge of history. Ezekiel's vision can be powerful and full of truth if he is saying that resurrection is possible. If he inspires a nation not to simply accept that their world is being torn apart. But he is lying to you if he tells you that God is going to fix it. God's not going to fix it. But, we act like this is all so complicated and so far out of our hands. What if we just passed a Senate rule that you had to recuse yourself from voting on anyone that had donated money to your campaign? That's not hard. That is a one vote fix. You can't vote on any individual who has contributed money to your campaign. And at that point, there would have been only about 40 senators who could have voted on Betsy DeVos, and she would not have won that seat. But another rule: what if corporations could not make political contributions if Congress governs their operations? Military contractors, pharmaceutical companies, medical insurance companies. How can they make contributions to the body that writes the rules that govern them? That simply should be made illegal. These are changes that could be made within a week if only we demanded them. Is resurrection possible? Sure, it's possible if you start caring. If you stop just accepting that you're slaves and that you have to die as slaves, if you could wake up and realize the abuses that are being done to you are not God-given, you can change it. Now, folks, this is not new information. 500 years ago, St. Teresa of Avila, who was not some radical progressive, but she said, "Christ has no body now but yours, no hands, no feet on earth but yours. Yours are the eyes through which he looks compassion on this world. Yours are the feet with which he walks to do good things. Yours are the hands through which he blesses the world. Yours are the hands. Yours are the feet. Yours are the eyes. You are his body. Christ has no body on earth but you." If our world will ever return to its senses, it will not be because of the prayers of the faithful or the goodwill of the tender-hearted. It will be because of the good work of courageous, generous, noble, rebellious people. And I hope I'm looking at a whole bunch of them right now. Amen.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.